I think it is important that people understand the complexity of the situation in Mali, because we tend to think it's Islamists against the southern Mali, but I think it's more complex than that. And the situation in the south needs to be understood so that we help as media, we help to find solution in those, because by reporting, I think we help the international community, we help the Malian to also discuss the situation. So it's important that that complexity, we help people to understand that complexity through the discussion we'll have today.
Thank you very much.
My proposition to you is that this is something much bigger and much wider. This is actually the beginnings of a major attempt to take over the Sufi, the Sunni Ummah, by a bunch of Salafists, largely funded by Saudi Arabia's private citizens, as indeed, of course, Al-Qaeda was, by Qatar, and also by the UAE, and as a precursor to the much wider battle, which is not against the West. We are the battlefield. We're not the enemy in this. The enemy is not the great Satan that it used to be, but the great heretic of Shia. And what's actually happening, what we're actually seeing now, is the beginning of the preparations for a much wider regional conflict between the Sunni and the Shia. So much less Islam versus the West as Islam versus Islam. And in case you think, and this is my last comment, that that's all comfortable because it's their problem, not ours, you need to remember that if you get a widening regional war in the Middle East, it cannot but have very, very serious global consequences.
And when we hear you say later joiners, is that you agreeing with Ibrahima that you had this Tuareg rebellion, which
yes,
was, and everyone's been piling in with their separate agendas?
Yeah, since independence, there's been at least 4 or 5 different Tuareg rebellions, 3 of which have been of some significance. And the last one now is, what we know. But the earlier demands were more of an identity nature. But the latest one was sort of hijacked by mercenaries coming from Libya and jihadists who already operated, somewhere in the Sahara, but saw this opportunity, seized it, because the area became a no man's land, to use it for training grounds and take over and sort of implementing the Sharia laws in an area which we know is almost 100% Islamized.
I got back from Mali the day before yesterday, so let me give you just a little bit of a briefing of what it's like on the ground rather than the bigger issues which my co-panelists have mentioned. François Hollande is Papa Hollande, he's Tonton Hollande. Enormous numbers of Malians are wildly enthusiastic about this intervention. They may or may not be right, but this is what the feeling is on the ground at the moment. I rode into Gao on the back of a Malian military pickup. It was one of the most exciting things I've ever done. There were thousands of people who followed us and who went to our sides on motorbikes, women on motorbikes. They hadn't been allowed to ride motorbikes since the jihadis had been in power for 9 months. They were waving French flags, they were waving Malian flags, they were shouting Mali, Mali. They were absolutely thrilled with what had happened and that the jihadis had been pushed out of their town. That is the situation on the ground. However, as everybody has said, this is complex. And many of the people who spurred this uprising by the jihadis, or this takeover by the jihadis, were Tuaregs. And there is now a feeling of hatred and vitriol towards the Tuaregs that I heard from southern Malians and from army officers that made me very, very worried. Because my greatest fear now is that the joy will go down. We all know what it's like. People who are seen as liberators are later seen as occupiers. That's one issue. But the next issue is that people will look for who to blame for the situation, the mess Mali is in. And I fear very much that there is going to be retribution and that the days of joy will turn into days of revenge.
Democracy, believe me, is less important than the rule of law. And I'm trying to get us away from seeing Mali as a very specific case that leads... Look, the truth is that the thing that all people, I don't care who they are, Mali, Bosnian, British, Syrian, want to see and will unite them is the rule of law, peace, and good governance.
Does the interim president feel legitimate to you?
I think that he has a huge problem of legitimacy. He's not elected. He was sort of a character who came up through the coup. At the moment, I think that he has gained legitimacy through the intervention because the vast majority of Malians seem to support the intervention, and he has gained stature. And when I was there when he was making a speech 3 days ago on Sunday, he looked and sounded much more presidential. People seem to like what he said, but I doubt very much that that will last, and he will need some kind of there will need to be further developments for him to have any real legitimacy.
Okay, and to you, madam, I think you've got the microphone.
Yes, this announcement that the elections will be on the 31st of July, does the panel think that's in any way realistic?
I don't think so.
I recognise that voice. You know far more about it than the rest of us. Where are you? Liz. Yes, I know you're there. Well, you know as well as we do, or better.
Who is the lady with the
She's
voice?
Liz Blunt. She's one of the greatest correspondents the BBC Africa Service has ever had.
We'll give her the microphone back. Would you answer your own question, Liz Blunt?
No, it's entirely self-interested. I've retired from being a foreign correspondent. I've been doing some election observing, and I'm dying to get back to Mali.
But what would your answer to the question?
What do you think?
Well, I'm awfully afraid that it's probably not realistic.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Can I make 2
But
points?
it was very
Well, I'm
specific.
going to ask you to lead the next section. You can bring.
On this particular issue.
Yeah.
Well, then I can't ask you to lead the next section fairly because you'll have more
Good.
time. No, but go on then, but don't be long, please.
God, he really pushes.
You sound like
doesn't he?
David Dimbleby like this.
Yeah.
And when the question here is it a new front in the
Yes.
fight against terrorism? But you were earlier saying it's a front in a war between Islamic groups.
But that is exactly right. I mean, that is what we have to look at here is the West is not the target. The West is the battleground. If you can do successful things to attack the West, as in the gas plant in Algeria, you use that to build up support in the Ummah. What we are seeing now is a takeover of the Sunni Ummah as a precursor, it seems to me, to a widening battle between the Sunni and the Shia, and we should be bloody worried about that. So the more we can prevent this takeover of the Sunni Ummah by increasing the capacity of countries to be able to look after themselves rather than need us to do it, the more we will avoid that outcome.
And who can stand between those sides? I mean, who's the force? Is it Western or is it African?
It's Islamic. I mean,
So you need an Islamic army to separate the
No, I didn't say an Islamic army. You need to make sure that those reformists in Islam who do not wish to see their religion taken over by those who propose medievalism, darkness, ignorance and brutality, and there's plenty of those, win. You know, they're going to win that battle far more effectively than we are.
Can I make a point or ask Paddy a question?
Me a question? Yeah,
Yes, I want to ask a question, which is, so what... Our allies, Britain's allies are Qatar and Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, but that's the point.
And so that's what I want. That's what I want to ask you about.
That is exactly the point.
Yes.
We regard them as our closest allies, but they are funding the movement. They are funding the movements which we are fighting against.
Yes,
That's exactly
Ashdown. They're allies in simply for the fact that they buy weapons.
Yeah.
That's it.
Well, also because they
sell oil, they give oil.
because there are lots of oil and small things like that. But that's exactly the
And
problem.
that's the solution we need to avoid, because even you take Algeria, you take you take Niger, you take. You know, for now, everybody is quite on Niger. Everybody is quite on Mauritania because Areva is there, and France is protecting Areva. They're protecting
That's
uranium.
the uranium mine.
They're protecting Mauritania. They're protecting the gas in Algeria, and that's enough for them. Until those are safe, fine. But it's not that enough.
Yes. No, it's not. I mean, Lindsay points out precisely the contradictions of our policy. We're sending people, and the French, by the way, have spotted this. Their troops are now fighting against people funded by Qatar, by the UAE, funded by private sources in Saudi Arabia. I don't think, by the way, that would be allowed to happen if it was against the Saudi Arabian government's intentions. Absolutely. So here's a thought for you. One of the ways of resolving the crisis in Mali is diplomacy on Saudi Arabia, Qatar and UAE. Yeah. And that's why you realize this is much wider than Mali. You have to use your levers elsewhere.
And the question is, will there be a more common approach? Paddy, Wilfred, Lindsay, will there be, the gentleman's question is, there was all this bickering among the West, couldn't agree. Yes. Suddenly it's worked. Will we now see a change? Something
it's
more
worked so far.
Yes.
Paddy, you go first.
Well, I'm not sure. I hope it will. Because if we won't coordinate, we're not going to be able to achieve anything. I mean, let's just put it this way. If, in a coordinated fashion, the West, who want to see this battle won by moderate Islam against jihadist Islam, for reasons of their own security, were to dedicate half the amount of money they would have to spend for military intervention on aid, assistance, I think you would resolve many more problems than you will do by putting boots on the ground in this area.
Wilfred?
Well, the French intervention would have sort of called for more intervention in a normal sort of war scenario, but this is not a normal war scenario. Many people, many countries are happy to see the French do the dirty job. They will not put boots on the ground. They will help the French stay in Mali as long as they can by providing logistical assistance, by providing transportation, all the stuff to make the French feel sort of wanted, if you want. So no more intervention, I don't think, but more help from other countries.
Well, the key thing is what happens with the African forces, because the French are supposed to now take a back seat, and there is a coalition of African forces coming in from a wide variety of African countries. Now, the issue on coordination there is what backup they will get. African peacekeepers have a poor record. They were bad in Sierra Leone, they were bad in Liberia, they will be bad in Mali, unless there is a lot of help given to them. Most of that help must be logistics, because armies which don't have logistics prey on the people.
Okay, two more questions.
Let me finish.
Sorry.
And the issue of human rights abuse is really important. It's not a soggy liberal issue. The issue of human rights abuse, if the African armies go in and commit human rights abuses, and if the Malian army continues to commit human rights abuses, then the conflict in Mali will go on, and the issue of retribution will go on and on. So one of the most useful things that the Western governments can do is try and assist those armies in not doing that. And that, I think, if they can coordinate on that, I think that would be an extremely important...
Such an important point. If we were to, as a Western group, in a coordinated fashion, spend money, effort and political will on building up the capacity of those regional forces, the African Union forces, it would be much better than preparing troops in the middle of France to fly out to Mali.
Paddy Ashdown talks of the true values of Islam. Islam, to me, looks to be inherently warlike as well as inherently anti-Semitic.
But does Christianity look the same to you as well? If you look... What about the Crusades? That was friendly, was it? Or
Christianity is inherently peaceful. Christian actors do terrible things.
Christian actors do terrible things.
Excuse me. Answer this question. In the last 1,000 years, how many thousands... Sorry. In the name of which religion have more people been killed? Is it Islam or is it Christianity?
Not Christianity. Politics is not the same.
We'll be here all night.
All right, okay.
But he's asked the question. He's allowed.
I am a Christian.
I just think we should recognise in Christianity we have motes in our eyes too.
Why don't you stick up for your own side?
Ah, well, that's a different
we're
issue.
taking sides.
My side, my friend, is humanity.
Can I just come up with something?
Can
I just say something?
Doesn't take sides.
Can I just say something? Which is that, as we have discussed, more than 90% of the Malian people are Muslim. That Timbuktu is the centre of peaceful Islam, of Sufi shrines, which were where it is the centre of learning for thousands of years. Where one of the things that we've been reporting on in the last week or so are the 14th, 15th, and 16th century manuscripts of Islam.
It's the sixth
from Timbuktu
holiest city in Islam.
Yeah, these people were not violent. There was violence which was done to them by the jihadis who have come in the last 2 years or so. But the people of Mali, who are 90% Islamic, are not violent. Thank you.
Any religion, any religion can become violent because of the individuals.
Can I?
Yes.
An individual takes up the holy book, reads it, interprets it, becomes violent.
What do we want? Sharia law? When do we want it? Never.
Never.
And that's the problem.
No,
That's the problem.
I'm sorry. If they choose to have Sharia law,
but they didn't choose.
Well, okay, if it's forced on, that's a different thing.
That is what happened, though.
That's what happened.
My lord,
Paddy,
usually,
Paddy,
I don't think anyone has chosen.
No, we're going to call you my lord.
He was talking to me. He was talking to me. That's the point. That's the point. They have had it forced. This gentleman's correct. They have had it forced on them. They didn't want it. In a warlike way, they've had it.
Most countries where Sharia laws is the law.
Yeah, they don't want. No one wants it. They
no
get their
one's
arms
chosen
cut
to
off.
have it, but it does have Yes, it does have some positive sides.
Oh, please.
No, when applied, it does have. Some countries...
The trains run on time.
They mix it with laws and make, you know, it has positive sides.
I'm going to change the subject slightly and ask my friend
Again,
this.
it's individuals.
Sir, have you by any chance ever been to Siena Cathedral?
No.
May I recommend you do? Siena Cathedral was founded and built, by the way, in half its size that it was originally planned, and it was almost regarded as being the foundation stone of the Renaissance, the great aspiration of the Hellenic texts that were the foundation stone, the fountainhead of European values and humanity. And on the floor of Siena Cathedral, take a look at the pavimenti, and what you see there is not religious figures. You see Aristotle and Plato and Socrates. Why? Shall I tell you why? Because those Hellenic texts that we regard as the fountainhead of our European values had just been discovered in which university? Baghdad University, where they'd been preserved by Islam and incorporated into Islam while we were killing each other in the Dark Ages. There are no... we have used the sword, sir, and I have, rather more than we may like at times to admit. But here's the singular point. These values are universal values. They don't belong to this religion or that. They are universal values, and unless you look at them that way, you won't understand how to do it.
Right, let's move on.
No, Wilfred, sir, your question is very welcome. It's a public meeting, and thank you for your question. Can I thank our panel, who've been very rudely interrupted at times?
That's true.
But you've really briefed us fantastically from the beginning. Lindsay Hilson, Channel 4 News, Wilfred Willey, who's president of the Malian Community Council in the UK, Paddy Ashdown, don't call him Lord, and Ibrahima Diane from BBC Afrique, and to you, the smartest and best looking audience in London as well, may I say. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much.
I read a book.